I sat in the back of the bar on a Saturday afternoon, enjoying the quiet. This place became my favorite a few years ago when I was wandering around alone. I opened it shortly after I arrived here, leaving Paradise, the place I used to call home. At that time, I bought a local gas station and garage for less than they were worth. They were on the market for 2 years. The owner was desperate to sell. I saw the potential and made a low cash offer as I thought the location would be ideal for a fresh start. It helped me forget what I had to leave behind. The first thing I did was build a large retail store at the front of the property facing the gas stations to supply the city after the only grocery store closed at 7 in the evening. I also modified the pumps so I could fill up without going into the store. To do this, I had to move the tanks. The pumps were now visible from the store, leaving plenty of customer parking in our large parking lot. From 7 in the evening until midnight, the store was busiest. Now the gas station and store were open 24 hours a day. The garage, which was located at the rear of the property, was open from 8 to 5, 5 days a week. On Saturdays, I came to work on special projects. The bar was unhappy for a while when the retail portion began selling basic alcoholic beverages. It was like most of these small-town establishments. It was impossible to get rich quick here, but it provided a very good life and added much-needed employment to the community. Each year, we were able to save more than most. With no real work other than farming, most young people left as soon as they could. After some reorganization of the internal merchandising system, thanks to the woman I hired, the business became very successful. In a short time, he returned the money that I had invested in him in the form of a shareholder loan. We have doubled our staff as it has become very busy. On Fridays and Saturdays, we sold a lot of junk food as people leaving the bar tried to sober up a little before going home. On Sundays, we sold a lot of cold beer at a reasonable price. I was sipping a double shot of Jack Daniels with a glass of ice water and a slice of lemon on the side, having just finished replacing the steering column in an old man's old truck. It was a family heirloom and his pride and joy. It took me 8 months to find the right part, and even then I had to hand make some of the mounts. His family had been driving this truck since the 40s, and he showed no signs of stopping. I thought that if he could, I would be buried in it. 4 to 7 was the best time to be at the bar, as most of the regulars were having dinner. Within a couple of hours, the place would be filled with music lovers as the band started playing. Farm workers would bring farmers' daughters for after-work entertainment. In the 6 and a bit years that I've been here, I've built a good reputation for myself and made a lot of friends. Most locals are used to keeping an eye on each other and alerting each other when something unusual happens. I only went to the bar once a week, always at the same time on Saturdays, to have my one drink before heading home. This was my time for quiet reflection. I saw them come in and I regretted it because they automatically ruined the end of a perfect day. I could still recognize them anywhere and anytime and still regret it. The woman was my ex-wife's twin sister, and the young man I once called my son. It brought back memories I didn't want to remember. This was the period when I learned that evil cannot always be seen when you live with it. He has grown since the last time I saw him. His appearance changed a lot. He became more like his biological father. This proved to me that eventually the truth would come out anyway. The question was, why were they looking for me now? They approached the bartender and talked to him for a few minutes. I saw her take a photo out of her purse and show it to him. The bartender said a few words to them, and I saw them turn around and walk back out the door. I was grateful for my long, unkempt hair and full beard and mustache because it helped me look completely different, especially after I lost the weight. No one noticed the text message I sent. It said, "They're back, I'll be home when I can." About half an hour later, the bartender came out from behind the counter. He came over and sat down next to me. "What did they want, Tom?" I asked. "They want to give you a message. They say they heard rumors that you live here and came to check it out," Tom replied. "They say that a certain Willa is dying of cancer and she doesn't have long to live. They are looking for you because she wants to make peace." I asked to see a photo, claiming that I don't recognize the name. Who are they, and what do they want? I took out a pack of Pall Mall Red 100, pulled out a cigarette, tore off the filter, and inserted the smooth end into my mouth before lighting it. This woman is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my wife's son, whom she has been passing off as mine for many years. Based on your years of observing people, do you think they were telling the truth? This time, judging by their body language, he replied, I'd say they're trying to be honest in part, but they're definitely hiding something important. I nodded. My ex-wife and her sister were always masters of deception, pretending everything was fine while actually betraying them behind their backs. He stood up and went back behind the counter. My thoughts returned to the events of almost 7 years ago. When I left that day, I told them all that I wouldn't be back for 7 years. They laughed at me like I was a fool. For them, I probably was like that. But they learned the truth the hard way because it was the last time they saw or heard from me directly. They didn't believe I was that serious or offended. They thought I was just angry because of the prank they had just played. Little did anyone know that a few weeks earlier I had learned that our youngest child was my brother-in-law's son. This set me on a path of discovery that has led me to this moment. What they didn't know then was that I had evidence from a family member who said she had seen me repeatedly betrayed by Willa and Tammy, whom she called the evil twins. In this old lady's eyes, they were black witches practicing their art of pure evil. Earlier that week, before I left, we discovered a newly purchased insurance policy on me with double coverage for accidental death. If I died by accident, the payout would be $4 million. The Grand Dame told me to run for my life. When I walked out of our house to the work truck, little did they know that it was already loaded with everything I wanted to take from our 16-year marriage. I pulled out of the driveway onto the highway, turned right, and never looked back. By the time I stopped, I was already 2 states away. A couple of hours later, my wife saw the sheriff's car pull up to the house. She came out to meet him when he got out of the car. "Are you Mrs. Viller Raisin?" he asked. When she said yes, he said, "Ma'am, you have just been notified." "About what?" she asked jokingly, thinking it was all a big joke. When she opened the envelope of legal documents, they all learned the truth in that hard way, realizing for the first time how much I knew. I heard from the Grand Dame that my wife was devastated to learn that I ended our marriage without hesitation. My lawyer and I even listed all of our assets and liabilities. The DNA report showed everything. The romance lasted a year. The divorce petition contained times, dates, places, and hotel receipts showing which credit card was used. The material supplier even provided photographs of the couple in the act. Tammy was involved in these events because she sat with our children and their children so that they could realize their relationships. In a legal envelope, at my request, he enclosed a sealed letter. When she opened it, Willa's sister, who was there, found out that I was suing her husband for alimony, interference with marriage, and public defamation. That's when their laughter stopped. Nobody thought it was funny anymore. I was no longer the joke they thought I was. Now I was laughing. After all, their constant joke was that, in their opinion, the only thing I was good for was making money. Everything I did seemed to turn into gold and generate income, so Willa and the children were spoiled and lacked for nothing. Villa found out later that day that I had sold all 3 businesses I had built from scratch and paid off all our debts. Even the 2 apartment buildings we owned were sold for a good profit. I canceled all credit cards and removed my name from all bank accounts. I transferred half of our house to her and took half of our assets in cash. All she had to do was agree to the divorce. By doing this, I reduced our income from about $10,000 a month to 0. Unfortunately for Sister Willa, she had to learn the cost of taking advantage of me the hard way. My lawyer took everything they had before they divorced because of the damage I caused to all of them. He froze their assets before they were even notified. After their divorce was finalized, they were both left broke. My lawyer called her back to his office when it was over and gave her back a quarter of what they had lost. "Why is he doing this?" she asked. My lawyer said, "For him, it was never a matter of money. For him, it was and remains a matter of principle. In case you don't know, that's what he thinks you and your sister don't have. He believes that by giving you this money, he is giving you a chance to start over and hopes that you will learn from your experience. Willa refused to sign the divorce agreement until she spoke to me in person. So we were both in limbo, legally separated but not divorced. I didn't need to talk to someone who had deliberately lied to me for years. She had to work for the first time in her life. It was a new experience for her to learn that money quickly disappears when it doesn't come in. My lawyer forwarded all important documents to a mailbox I rented from a FedEx retail store, and they mailed everything to my business address once a week. I did this on purpose, knowing that with the history of our lives together, their shit would never stop. The two sisters loved to play with human emotions and manipulate everyone involved in their lives. Knowing them, I knew that they would make plans for revenge. It was not a question of if, but when. In their family, there was no such thing as leaving. They'll be annoyed that they can't find me. The longer it takes, the worse their revenge will be. No one could afford to fool them. Until now, I thought I had done it. With Tammy showing up, I knew their game wasn't over yet. I finished my drink and headed home through the back door in case they were watching the front door. I walked through the empty lot in the back and walked around the block, using the back alleys, heading to my pickup. I had just opened the door and was preparing to sit down when a man stepped forward and said, "You are truly a difficult man to find, Mr. Arthur Seth Rayson, without a doubt." I turned and looked at him, asking, "How would you know that?" "My name is Peter Edwards. Your eldest daughter, Connie, is my wife," he said. "This could be a blessing or a curse for you," I said, "if she acts like her mother. So why are you here, and what do you want?" "I came to find you," he said. "There are some things from the past that need to be sorted out." "They would have worked out if your mother-in-law," I said, "would have just signed the divorce agreement." "What divorce agreement?" Peter asked in surprise. I told him to get in his car and follow me. A few minutes later, outside the town's main street, I turned right and drove about a mile, then made a left turn into a long driveway. I stopped at a farmhouse and brought him into my home office. I pulled out my divorce file, turned on the printer, and told him to make copies of everything he needed. Peter didn't need to know that this wasn't where I lived, but I built it for the Grand Dame, hoping she would finally decide to move out of paradise. Peter was a handsome young man, perhaps in his mid-20s. His hair was professionally styled. He looked confident, which came naturally. He seemed to me an educated man. The question was whether he really was who he said he was, and whether he was part of Willa and Tammy's team. He used my Wi-Fi password and downloaded everything into his laptop from my home computer. All important records were kept here, with a master copy of everything in a safe deposit box. One of the things that interested him was a copy of the sheriff's department report that Villa had to sign the day she was notified. The only thing he printed was a letter from Villa's lawyer to mine. It was this lawyer's letter to mine that did the most damage to what he believed in. It laid everything out in black and white. Villa and her lawyer agreed to the division of assets, but did not sign the divorce until she spoke with me in person. The lawyer's letter acknowledged receipt of all outstanding monies. While he was doing all this, I looked at his expression. It showed that he had no idea what he was learning. My documents, as they were presented, contradicted something he believed. "Do you think Connie knows?" he said. "That's a question you have to answer for yourself," I replied. "One question for you. Is Willa really dying of cancer or not?" "Who the hell told you that?" asked Peter. "Tammy was in town today with Seth, looking for me," I said. "That's what they told the bartender I know." "She's fine and living in a civil marriage with the man who was her lawyer at the time and is now carrying his second child," Peter said. "She was the one who asked me to find you to start the divorce. She claims it's to get married again." He opened his phone and called his wife. I heard her in the background. He then put the phone on speaker so I could hear both sides of the conversation. "Connie, did you know your mother was lying about the divorce not starting?" asked Peter. "What are you talking about?" Connie said. You know that our dad ran away because he went bankrupt. Right after he left that day, we kids also went out, so we weren't home when Mom found out. Mom later told us that our deadbeat dad left us all. Mom and Aunt Tammy told us later that he cleaned up the rest before leaving town. If it weren't for our stepfather, we wouldn't have survived. I'm sending you a legal file. Ask my sister to watch our baby, Peter said. Then, as soon as you read it, let me know right away. While they were still talking, I stood up and took 2 bottles of buds, opened them, and placed one in front of him. Why didn't you tell my daughter you found me? I asked. Connie and I have been married for almost 2 years. She gave birth to our son 3 months ago. I assure you, I won't tell anyone I found you yet, Peter said. For everyone in the family, I'm just working overtime investigating the case. With these words, he took out his wallet and showed me the badge. This confirmed that he was a police officer with the Paradise Police Department. I opened my laptop and went to my hometown's web page. By clicking on the link, I was taken to the police page, which confirmed his words. It was that traffic accident that was reported a few months ago that gave me the lead to find you, Peter explained. Connie filed a missing persons report, which was placed on the watch list. The insurance company notified me of a payout on your behalf. Why didn't you tell Connie you found me? I asked again. By reviewing your detailed file, it became clear that something else was going on, Peter said. The first question I asked was what happened to the $250,000 in cash that Villa was supposed to receive on top of the deed to the house. The second question was why are they all lying about what really happened? Looks like someone was feeding you lies, just like me, I said as his phone rang. This is my wife, I'll put it on speaker, Peter said, so please be quiet. Hello, honey, my daughter said. Where did you get all this? Is it real? If so, then we have all been deceived for years. Seth does not know about his true origin, neither do I. My sister Karen will be shocked to see this. Mom tortured her for always defending our father so they don't talk anymore. This paints a different picture from the lies we were told. Apparently, my mom and my aunt left my dad no choice. They both played with his life behind his back for years. What amazes me is that the divorce isn't finalized because my mother won't sign it. It makes me wonder what's really going on. This is real. I got the information straight from the widow of your father's lawyer. Unfortunately, I had to go to another state to find it. Turns out her husband kept duplicates of all his records on his home computer, Peter said. I'm glad he did. The documents show that your mother was served with a petition for divorce the same day he left. I wrote on a piece of paper, have Connie talk to Aunt Josie if she's still alive. Peter nodded. Peter, it's more important than ever to find my father, Connie said. Even if only to finalize the divorce for his sake, my father deserves to be freed from my mother and her scheming. What happened to the money she received? If she owned the house, why did she have to sell it? The more I study the facts, the more I wonder what the hell was going on and why she planned to sue him for abandonment as soon as she found him. Hey, I have an idea. Ask my sister to babysit our son a little longer. You talk to Aunt Josie and let her know what we found out. Maybe it'll get her to open up, Peter said. This is important to you because it's starting to look like there may be a strong case of fraud. The question to ask is why your mother slandered your father for years. That's something I'll have to talk to the district attorney about. $250,000 the cash seems to have disappeared as soon as it left your father's lawyer's hands. Another thought, don't even tell your sister about this yet. If the DA wants to investigate, it's better that no one knows anything. I left the table to get us a couple of refills to give him some privacy until they finished their conversation. Why do you want Connie to talk to Aunt Josie? Asked Peter. Josie was the one who gathered all the information about Willa and George's affair, I said. She never married, but she watched over the extended family like a mother hen while she raised her only daughter. Being a single mother changed her perspective on many things. She believed that Tammy and Willa conspired and orchestrated all of this, and George and I were used to it. But what their ultimate goal was is the million-dollar question. If this is true, then the question is why, said Peter. Aunt Josie's granddaughter, Jody, has wanted her to move in with her for years. She always says, not until the truth comes out. We see Jody when she comes into town with her 2 sons to visit. Well, Jody, Josie's granddaughter, leads a very private life, I said. So do I. Hanging out with the Withers sisters seems to come at a cost to everyone around them. Willa and Tammy have been using people for most of their adult lives. It wasn't until Josie gave me the materials that I started to realize it. Do you have any questions for me about your children and what's going on in their lives before I go? Asked Peter. Not until it has been proven to my satisfaction that you are who you say you are, I said. With the family's history, this may be another part of their game, and you're doing exactly what they told you to do. You might want to investigate the sudden death of my lawyer, because if she plans to sue me, that makes her sure that she will win. Peter's face turned pale. I think he realized for the first time what type of person he was marrying. We decided to trust each other enough to exchange cell phone numbers. He promised to inform me if he found out anything. I stood up, walked him to the door, shook his hand, and said goodbye. As soon as he left, I cleaned everything up and closed the house. I got in the car and drove the long way home, where Jody was waiting for me to make sure I wasn't being followed. This gave me time to think about the situation. My life has improved greatly since I left the past behind me. Did I want to experience it all again? Did Willa and Tammy have a long-term vendetta because of their need to get the better of me? Knowing them like I did, I knew I had to be prepared for what was coming, because if they ran out of money, they would do anything out of greed to get it. As soon as I walked in the door, 2 little kids hugged my legs. I bent down and picked up my 2 little ones. At 3 and 4 years old, they were the apples of my eyes, just like their mother. I felt blessed to have all 3 in my life. My civilian Jody's wife shouted that dinner was almost ready, so go wash up. I gladly did it. Over dinner, I told her what happened after I closed the store. I could never have imagined how my life would change the day I left paradise forever. When I left town almost 7 years ago, I promised Grand Dame Josie, Grandma Jody, that I would keep in touch, and I did. I tried to call her every other Sunday. A year and a quarter of a day passed when she called me, needing help. Her only granddaughter needed to get out of a bad marriage and start over in a safe place. Jody was 10 years younger than me at the time and had no children. I didn't really know much about her since they lived on a military base in another state. But I owed Josie and was glad to repay her for everything she had done for me. It took me a week to find her a 2-room apartment and partially furnish it. Finding housing in a small town is almost impossible. I got it thanks to a friend of a friend. The night I was going to pick up Jody, she quit her job, withdrew all the money from her bank accounts, and packed her things. Her husband was to be notified as soon as he returned from his last intensive training assignment at the base, which lasted 2 weeks. They were undergoing training that simulated real combat conditions, so he was away from home the entire time. It was around 8 p.m. when I pulled up to her address in the U-Haul truck I had rented for just one trip. I arrived quietly so that no one would know. With a couple of her neighbors and a few friends, we moved her things into the truck. I was in her city for less than 4 hours. When they asked me where I was from, I refused to answer, saying that, for now, it was better that no one knew. Jody and I started getting to know each other as we drove back. It was the middle of the night when her grandmother called her. I smiled when she said, "Yes, Granny, Art took me. You might have warned him that he looks like a wild man of the woods who could look decent if he cleaned himself up." The next day, Josie contacted her granddaughter's lawyer to have all of her legal documents and correspondence sent to my FedEx mailbox. Jody warned us both that her soon-to-be ex-husband would be a problem. I took a proactive stance to protect her. Over time, we both learned that my thoughts about her situation were correct. Jody took over running my store as soon as she settled in. Over the course of several weeks, she proved to me that the store really needed a real manager. It turned out to be the best thing I ever did because it was so easy for her. The changes she made with my approval made the job even more successful. For her, the needs of her clients came first. Her personality alone attracted a lot of new business. She worked with each employee, assigning responsibilities and codes of conduct. This has blessed us into a smoothly running operation with no staffing issues. Josie had to get a protection order against Jody's ex-husband due to the ongoing verbal threats he continued to make to her. What he did because of Jody leaving led to his dishonorable discharge, which forced him to move back to my hometown because he believed his ex-wife would be there. Being new in a small town makes you the center of attention, so to keep some single men in line, Jody continued to wear her wedding ring. It gave her protection when she needed it most and time to adjust to her new life. For several weeks, she took care of all the banking matters and got the books in order. Everyone accepted her because I brought her. Jody was beautiful in every way, but it was her personality and honesty that I liked. It didn't take her long to understand the man. She had long black hair that hung straight down, which she kept with pins away from her face. Breasts that were there, but not so much that they were the first thing you looked at. A beautiful pear-shaped figure, like most women. It was built more to keep you warm on a cold winter night than anything else. I thought she would be a good wife for the next man she loved. When asked who the lucky man was, she answered, "I'm sure you can guess for yourself." This was enough for rumors to start spreading. Soon, because of gossip, everyone thought that we met online. Behind our backs, she was called a future mail-order bride. On Saturdays, because I was working alone that day, she started bringing me lunch in a box. I am one of those people who, when doing something, forget about time to eat. As a result, I lost a lot of weight. During this time, we began to build our relationship. For weeks, everyone thought we were a couple. If one of us was invited somewhere, it was automatically assumed that the other would come too. Neither of us were looking for a new relationship, but we somehow got into it. Josie kept us informed of events at home. We were interested to learn that Jody's ex-husband is in a relationship with benefits with Tammy. The day she got her divorce, we moved to a new level of relationship. We spent the night celebrating at the town's only watering hole with a group of friends. While dancing slowly in the dim light, we shared our first kiss. 6 months later, we moved in together. While the kids took a bath together in preparation for bed, I placed a small trash can in the sink and shaved my beard and mustache until there was only stubble left. My children were fascinated watching me. I took the bowl and brush she gave me for Christmas, lathered my face, and did the same for them, much to their delight. Jody walked in, seeing why the kids were giggling, just as I started shaving. Her blue eyes sparkled with surprise. Our two little boys were also soaped up. All three of them watched me as I finished what I started. "Looks like Daddy's going to look like you with a clean face," Jody teased. "Do you think I should cut his hair too?" Both scoundrels said yes. I just laughed and said, "I can do that at the hairdresser on Monday." "No, I'll do it myself," Jody said, "before you change your mind." So after the kids were dry and dressed for bed, they sat at the kitchen table watching their mom cut my hair. By the time she finished, I looked human. There was more hair on the floor than on my head. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I told Jody she did a great job. Jody sent me into the shower to rinse off all the little hairs while she cleaned up the mess. While I was doing this, her grandmother called because my daughter Connie had just left. Jody got the impression that when it came to her grandmother's sister's family, Josie was planning a war. Her grandmother believed it was time to put an end to these bitches. Connie left her great-grandmother, knowing that each of my 3 children should have received an annuity of $600 a month in lieu of the child support I purchased through Mutual Life. None of them received it. Damn, it was a wild night. If I had known that shaving and cutting my hair would turn her on so much, I would have done it sooner. For the next week, I had to endure, "Who are you and what did you do with?" jokes from everyone who knew us. Jody was asked if she had to blackmail me into joining normal society. Jody responded with her usual humor, saying that she had promised to make me take a bath at least 3 times a week. Most got the joke, but some didn't. It was interesting to know how things go in paradise when you believe that your affairs do not smell. Bird of Paradise told me that I was going to be sued for abandonment, desertion, and arrears of child support in civil court. Jody and I both found it funny. They believed that if they received a court order, they could hire a collection service to find me. When the mail stork delivered the news, he thought it was a big joke. His boss and the DA even hired a lawyer to represent me. He then explained that they were using my situation to buy time to collect all the evidence. Peter estimated that Willa and Tammy stole more than $48,000 from each of our children. They began to review the sudden death of my former lawyer with new eyes. Jody's ex-husband is now an interesting person because of this. When considering a cold case in connection with my proposals, an accidental death is now being treated as a criminal matter. If what they found out turns out to be true, Willa and Tammy could be looking at 7 to 10 years in state prison. Villa's former lawyer, now her common-law husband, may be disbarred because he was the one who filed the lawsuit. The fraud had to play out before charges could be laid. The lawyer they hired for me will be paid for by them. They wanted all my records so that they could be produced at the end of the trial because it would give them time to build a stronger case against them. I had to look in the mirror to see if I had the word sucker burned into my forehead. For a couple of weeks, we had peace and quiet. Then the great lady called. Josie called us on Sunday evening with the news that the paperwork would be filed on Monday. She emailed me everything she had collected over the past 7 years. She expertly put together a whole bunch of notarized statements, personal conversations recorded on video about what was going on, and the names of 3 or 4 attorneys who might be great for the counterclaim she thought I should file. What caught my eye was the $2 million accident insurance on me. Neither of us knew she still existed. This explained where some of the money went. Jody found out that it was purchased 6 months before I left. Jody and I spent half the night forwarding all the information, once we had verified it, to the DA. Jody and I both now believed that all this was being done to attract me back so that I could be framed and removed. The next morning, Jody called all the lawyers Josie recommended and chose one. Everything we had was emailed to them along with a huge fee. As soon as Villa's team filed the claim, I filed a counterclaim and sent them notice before they could serve it on me. On Friday morning, Jody called me. Josie was on her way and brought some guests. They left Paradise on Thursday evening, stayed overnight at a hotel, and were expected to arrive this evening. They left under cover of darkness in case they were being followed. This told me that things were starting to come to a head on the other end. Jody and I decided it was best to close the store on Saturday and make it a real long weekend for the family. Peter was driving her along with Connie and their son. All Connie knew was that they were going to Jody's. It was almost 7 in the evening when we saw a Ford Explorer pull into the driveway along with an Escape. We could see 4 adults in 2 cars as they approached. Jody saw the concern on my face and took my hand. My truck was parked in the garage, so no one would have guessed I was there. We watched them get out of their cars. My wife, Jody, asked, "Who's with Josie?" "This is Peter, his wife, my eldest Connie, holding their baby," I replied. "And Karen, my second eldest." "Are you ready for this?" Jody asked. "As ready as I can be," I replied, picking up our eldest. Jody picked up our youngest and opened the front door. United as a family, we came out to meet our guests. I was the last person my daughters expected to see. Karen immediately burst into tears. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and hugged Karen tightly. Connie, having handed her son to her husband, also came up to me. It took a few minutes for the emotions to begin to calm down. Both my daughters have turned into very beautiful girls. Seeing them standing side by side was a memory I will never forget. "Nice to see you again, Peter," I said, shaking his hand. After introductions, Jody served us all a huge dinner. It's a good thing Jody prepared a lot of food. Prime beef, mash, gravy, fresh homemade scones, Yorkshire pudding, and green beans. Hot apple pie straight from the oven for dessert completed the meal. After our kids settled down, we started discussing everything. "First of all, Art, can I call you Daddy?" Peter asked. I nodded in agreement. "Then, Dad, The Don now believes that Jody's ex-husband's car was the vehicle that was interfering with your lawyer's car when the accident occurred. We have located the current owner and are currently conducting a paint comparison in the state. If we can make a connection, he will be charged with manslaughter, Peter explained. The fire that destroyed his office that same night was always considered arson by fire inspectors. In the video, he is seen in the background watching the burning building. Because Villa and her lawyer have sealed the divorce papers, they believe there is no record to prove what actually happened so far. They filed a lawsuit against you this week. Jody looked at me with tears in her eyes. I always thought you were overprotective of me when we moved here, but now I see that you were right. I thought the questions you asked my grandmother were excessive. Now I understand that you needed to know who we were dealing with before deciding on a course of action. Willa and Tammy received your claim on Thursday, Josie said. They must have realized that I was in contact with you after this action. We were afraid that they would come after me, so we decided to come here urgently. Grandma, we have your house ready for you to move into, Jody said. It's furnished, so all you need is your stuff. Most of them are in the car with me, Josie said. Connie agreed to send the rest to me along with personal items that I want to keep as antiques. I gave her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. I needed to get out of paradise quickly. I'll go back with Peter and Connie and rent a U-Haul to bring everything here, I said. It's time for us to find out if our assumptions are correct. What are your guesses? Peter asked. That the lawsuit filed against me is a ploy to lure me out, I said. With 2 million rubles in accident insurance on me, it is clear that the death of my former lawyer was a test to see if it would work with me. Peter, Connie, Karin, and Josie turned pale. They seemed to be aware of reality for the first time. None of them saw the whole picture. They couldn't understand why. It was only after hearing my thoughts that everything came together. Oh God, they planned your death, Dad, Connie said. Before you left town. You knew it, that's why you left the way you left. I replied with a big smile. I had a good guess at the time, but even my lawyer didn't believe it. Looks like he learned the hard way that I was right. Peter excused himself to make some important calls. This gave my daughter's wife and I time to learn a little more about each other. Jody pulled out photos of me when she first met me. Both daughters admitted that they would not even recognize me. When Peter returned to the room, everyone fell silent. Villa will be detained the day after the holiday towards the end of the day. We can hold her for 48 hours before charges are filed. She will be charged with 3 counts of grand theft for stealing an annuity from her children, Peter explained. We will slow down the process so it will take her a few days to get bail. Dad, if you can fly out on Wednesday and rent a U-Haul to come into town. Stop at a few of your old places to get noticed. If anyone asks what you're doing, say you're here to pack Josie's things, Peter explained. This way, Villa will be connected to the city prison. The prosecutor, when I told him your thoughts about the whole situation, said that you are absolutely right. Until your thoughts were voiced, we could not put everything together. When you arrive at Josie's house, we'll have police protection for you until this is all over. Peter, you're saying that the father of my children is a bait to lure my cousins out, Jody said. What guarantee do you want to give me that you won't call and tell me I'm a widow before we're officially married? I looked at Jody, and she saw the look on my face and said, Damn, you'll do it in a heartbeat, no matter what I think. That's one of the things I had to say about my Jody. She knew me better than I knew myself. Jody, Art has always been like this, so I called him to save you from obscurity when you finally decided you'd had enough of your ex's bullshit, Josie said. Art will never ask anyone to do anything he won't do himself. He wants us all to be free of witches forever. If that's what it takes, then to him it's worth it. Grandma, I'm just afraid that Art is going back to the devil's den to face the unknown, Jody replied. With a smile on her face, Josie replied, If Art was a boxer, he'd be a world champion. There's no one alive who thinks faster when he's on his feet. That's his edge against the witches. Anything he does will knock them out. Their games, Jody, we need to remember that Willa and Tammy have no idea that Art knows anything. Lady, relax, I'll be in Peter's arms, I said. If anything happens to me, remember, he'll have to answer to Connie, my daughter. Peter knew better than to say anything, so he simply shook his head. He knew how dangerous it could be for me when I returned to paradise. We were able to talk later as the four women got deep into discussing what was happening among themselves. The prosecutor thinks Jody's ex-husband will make his move soon after he finds out you're in town. He'll find out that you were the one who came and got Jody out of the terrible marriage she was in. He'll be furious, Peter said. This information will be passed on to Villa, who will be told about it by a fake informant who will be sent to the city jail on Thursday morning. The question is, if he's caught in the act, will he give up everything to save his skin? I asked. We looked into his military background, Peter said. Whenever he gets caught, he'll come clean and take responsibility. He's a performer, not a leader, so I expect him to give in easily. The only reason he's in a relationship with Willa and Tammy is because they are easy to manipulate. The sign read, "Welcome to Paradise, City of Refuge, population 34,823. All this only confirmed to me that the City Council has declared that the laws of the United States of America do not apply here. Welcome to our version of the Wild West. Fairness here depends on what we tell our guys in uniform to do. We arrest law-abiding citizens and ignore illegal immigrants. We are not biased. It is a progressive path after all. The privileged working class must always pay for the sins of others, as those in power must please their masters, who want to keep the minimum wage low and have cheap labor. To give this to them, many things had to be done that required those in power to turn a blind eye. In almost 7 years, little had changed, except that the main road had recently been paved. Everything seemed the same. I decided that if I wanted to get noticed, my first stop would have to be an old favorite spot, if it still existed. Luckily, Bob's and Betty's Burger Bar was still around. It looked the same, only it had been recently painted. I pulled into the parking lot, got out of the rental truck, and headed to the main entrance at 11:15. I was a little earlier than the lunch crowd that usually came on weekdays. I hoped that, being a former businessman, they would recognize me. We wanted them to quickly know that I was back. As I sat down at the table and received the menu, I noticed several faces looking at me. I saw several people using mobile phones. The waitress came over with my coffee and creamer and asked if I was ready to order. "Is there a Wednesday special with meatloaf, baked beans, and garlic mashed potatoes?" I asked. "How do you know about this?" asked the waitress. "It is intended for regular customers and is not advertised. Tell Jack that Art wants brown gravy and some fried onions on his meatloaf," I said. The waitress looked at me like I was crazy. I stood up and said, "Don't worry, I'll tell him myself." I walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen with the waitress following me and loudly announced my lunch order. Jack turned and looked at me. "You're a fool," Jack said with a smile. "You're here a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Susan, please bring Art's coffee here. That way we can talk while he eats at the end of the prep table." Jack was the son of the original owners and never changed the name. We've been friends most of our lives. We talked until rush hour passed. He told one of the employees to call his wife to join us. This gave us the opportunity to discuss important things. "Art, you need to know that after you left, the wife ended her friendship with Willa and Tammy forever. She didn't like what they did and what they said about you and the kids." "Jack, several things will happen. The arrest should have happened last night, and if some people's assumptions are correct, this will start a chain of events like a series of dominoes." I explained. "Connie's husband, Peter, works with me, so I came back early." Jack looked at me with all seriousness and said, "He's a damn good cop and as honest as glass. He put 2 of our former city councilors in jail last year for corruption. You'll have to tell me all about it later. There are too many big ears here." We saw Sasha drive into the parking lot. Damn, I thought, she looks good. I sat down and waited for her to come in. I knew that when she came in, she would see me from behind and would not suspect anything. "Jack, what happened?" Susan said it was important. Sasha said before seeing me. I stood up and turned to her. Sasha, my younger sister, could not restrain herself. Her big brother came home. I took her into my arms and hugged her tightly as if it was yesterday. It took several minutes for her to calm down. Jack signaled to the kitchen staff to give us a few minutes alone. "Do Mom and Dad know you're back?" Sasha asked. "No, and it's better if it remains a secret for a few more days," I replied. "Are you here because Villa was detained last night?" my sister asked. "Yes, and it will get worse before it gets better," I said. "As soon as I get to the place where I will be staying, I will have police protection. All I can say is that the police are reviewing the death of my former lawyer with new eyes. They now have reason to believe that it is connected with his arson office." The look on Jack and Sasha's faces said it all. With what was going on in Paradise, it was well known that the district attorney, appointed 3 years ago, was trying to clear up a lot of cases that had never been resolved. "Your bait to lure out something or someone," Jack said quietly. "If our guesses are correct, arson, murder, and several other crimes will be solved within a few days," I replied. Everything was done to create a situation in which I would be forced to return to the city. Villa's arrest and my sudden return would upend a very carefully planned conspiracy. "What's behind all this?" asked Jack. $2 million accident insurance policy," I said. "Prisoner on me." My sister walked out of the restaurant with me to my rental truck. We were standing and talking when we noticed Tammy drive up. "Where will you be staying?" my sister whispered. "At the grand lady's house. I'm going to move her things to the new house." I said. "She wanted to be closer to her granddaughter and our 2 sons," I answered with a smile. "Jody and I have been together for over 5 years. We have 2 sons who just turned 3 and 4. My sister was in complete shock. "How are you and Jody?" "Josie and I were always in touch," I explained. "When Jody needed help getting out of a bad marriage, her grandmother called me. I came and moved her to where I lived. We believe her ex-husband is the one who killed my lawyer and set his office on fire." "Do Tammy and Willa know that you are aware of what is happening?" Sasha asked. "No, but they'll start to realize it when they start making their moves," I answered as Tammy walked up to us. "Art, I need you to drop part of the lawsuit against us," Tammy said. "The prosecutor will bring charges against Villa within 48 hours. "Sorry, my lawyer says we can't because of Villa's new divorce suit alleging desertion, abandonment, and arrears of child support," I said. "Until the divorce court rules on her claims, everything must remain as is." "You can't be serious. How can we get her collateral without available assets?" Tammy said. "You have a court order freezing everything." "Perhaps your father will agree to help by providing his house as collateral," I said. "You are both his daughters after all." Tammy turned around in disappointment and walked away. "Willa and Tammy's father has nothing to do with them," Sasha said. "Ever since he found out about Seth's true origins, he says they turned out to be as evil as their mother." This brought another smile to my face. After that, I boarded the U-Haul and drove to Josie's house, stopping at several places to pick up packing materials. 3 hours later, I was backing into Josie's driveway. Using a large mirror, I parked as close to the garage door as possible. When I got out of the truck, I locked it. Before entering the house, I walked around it to make sure it had not been disturbed. Josie told me she had left the curtains open, but I noticed they were closed. Before entering the house, I texted Peter to let him know I had arrived and asked if he was the one who closed the curtains. He replied that there were police in the house and they could do it. Knowing this, I continued to open the door and go inside. "Mr. Ratchin," the officer said, handing me his phone. "Peter Edwards wants to talk to you." "Hi, Peter," I said. "Looks like those who should know. Tammy spoke to me in the burger joint parking lot right after I finished a long lunch. She wanted me to lift the asset freeze on her sister, and I refused." "I heard," said Peter. We have a recording of Willa and Tammy talking about the need to speed up their plans. Jody's ex-husband, Brad Press, was mentioned in their conversation many times. Willa told Tammy to let him know that you know where Jody is. That in itself should motivate him to do what we need. Looks like our guess is correct, because an hour later, Brad showed up and told him where you were staying. Our fake informant, who was arrested today, told her that you were back to move Josie's things, said Peter. When Brad asked where, Willa said to her granddaughter Jody. A few minutes later, I could be seen opening the garage door. As I entered the van, I could be seen unloading stacks of cardboard boxes needed to begin packing the house. At 7:30 in the evening, the order of pizza from Papa John's arrived. I opened the door when the courier knocked. The courier asked if I was moving. I replied that no, I was just returning to help a friend. Brad made his move around 11 p.m. using a tire crowbar. He broke the lock on the front door and sneaked inside. Seeing the only light on in the kitchen, he headed in that direction, pulling a 9mm pistol from his belt. He found me sitting there drinking a cup of coffee. "Hey, Art," Brad said. "Willa and Tammy say hi to you. I'm here to find out where Jody is so I can visit her." "Sorry, but that's something I would never say to my lawyer's killer," I replied, "or the man who set fire to his office. Before you kill me, because we both know you're going to do it, how much did they promise you from the insurance payout?" "What makes you think I did that?" he asked, taking the bait. "Because you look like someone they could convince with manipulative tians," I said, "to do their dirty work. So how much of the $4 million accident insurance policy did they promise you?" "4 million. They told me it was only 750,000, he said. I laughed and said, "Did you know that Seth is actually Tammy's first husband's son?" His face turned pale. "You see, both George and I were manipulated and used by both twins for many years," I said. "My lawyer, while working on my divorce, filed a lawsuit against George and Tammy for everything they had." Brad's face turned pale. "That's why I knew Villa's suit against me for desertion and arrears of child support was a fraud," I said. "The divorce was finalized, and all that was left was her signature to make it complete. She needed to manipulate me into coming back. That's when I realized everything. You're just the latest fool they used. So ask yourself what their plans are for you. My divorce only stopped their plans for my death. You, by killing my lawyer, brought their original plan for me back into action. You have the opportunity to put them in prison for years, as we know. Flair, it is difficult to look at a fool who realizes that as soon as he is no longer needed, he will be removed. Anyway, I'm trapped," Brad said. "Causing an accident to a lawyer and crashing his car into a tree at 70 miles an hour is manslaughter." "Killing me will be a life sentence," I said. "Manslaughter might get you 5 to 10 years, but murder gets you life. With me dead, they can claim that you were furious with Jody and they didn't know what you were going to do. They set you up to be a scapegoat because most accident insurance policies don't cover murder." "If you were in my place, what would you do?" Brad asked. "I would make a deal, testify against them, and hope that your cooperation will be taken into account. This way, you will take revenge on those who, most likely, plan to remove you with an overdose of drugs," I said. "After all, they should know that your use led to your dishonorable discharge." Brad put the gun on the table, saying, "Call the police." I said, "Brad, turn around, they're behind you." Connie watched her husband talk on the phone and wondered what was going on. Peter told her that her father was at Josie's house. A late-night call on his cell phone woke them both up. While he was busy talking, she put the kettle on to make hot chocolate for both of them. Peter smiled when he ended the call. "Your father surprised everyone today," he told his wife. "Brad broke in to kill him and wanted information about his ex-wife. He talked Brad down and basically forced him to confess everything. The fake cops recorded everything on video." Connie stood in amazement. "How did my father do this?" "He told Brad a few basic things he didn't know about, like the truth about Seth's parentage," Peter said. I think your father convincing Brad that the insurance policy wouldn't pay out for murder was the deciding factor. I don't know if that's true, but it created the doubt necessary for Brad to accept the consequences of a lesser crime instead of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Aunt Josie said my father was a quick thinker, but I didn't expect that. What does this mean for my mother and sister? Connie asked. If Brad agrees to testify in court against them, they will both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and attempted murder of your father at a minimum, Peter said. Connie picked up her phone and dialed Jody's number to tell her. Plans were made between the two of them. Josie would be babysitting for a couple of days because Jody was heading to the airport to catch a plane. Connie will pick her up from the airport when they text her the arrival time. After the call, she called her sister and explained everything. By the time her husband was dressed and getting ready to go to the station to get Brad's signed statement, she found herself too excited to sleep. It was already 8 in the morning when I woke up. The first thing I did was call Jack. I needed my front door fixed. He said he knew someone, and half an hour later that person was already there. The front door was replaced and new trim installed with a new lock. The handyman had just finished when my daughter Connie pulled up with Jody. Jody jumped out of the car, running towards me. Tears streamed down her face. At that moment, I realized what I had put her through over the past few days. Brad was taken into custody last night, I said. He surrendered to the police who were guarding me. I was never in any real danger. If that's the case, why didn't you call me? Jody said. Why did I have to find out this from Connie? It was almost 2 in the morning when the police left here last night, I answered honestly. I decided that I would call you today. I took my wife into my arms and hugged her tightly before saying, I promise I'll never put myself in that kind of danger again. Once the handyman finished, we locked the house after getting Jody's things inside and went to my brother-in-law's restaurant to eat. Karin met us there, as did Sasha and my parents. Jack's staff had to move 2 tables together so we could all sit. Jody received a proper greeting from all family members. Our breakfast, when it arrived, was beyond amazing. Jack was so excited about what happened that he prepared everything he could for us. My parents were very happy to learn that Jody and I had 2 sons named Carson and Hunter, after my grandfathers. I think my parents looked at every photo Jody had on her phone of our kids and us. My daughters opened up and told them about how they brought Josie and found me. We were still there when Peter came to join us. I saw that he looked tired. Willa and Tammy are both in custody now, Peter said. Brad freely confessed to everything, including his original intention to kill Dad. He will be charged with arson and 1 count of manslaughter once he testifies in the witch trial. Tammy and Willa are charged with 3 counts of grand theft, 2 counts of conspiracy for murder and fraud. The prosecutor is now meeting with the divorce judge who tried Dad's case to see if he can expedite the finalization of your original divorce. Peter, are you telling me that Art and I can finally get married? Jody asked, trying to process what she had heard. The prosecutor took the documents with him when he went to the judge, Peter explained, along with Dad's original divorce file. He hopes that when the judge gets the full story of everything, he will waive the need for Villa's signature, the waiting period, and issue a divorce certificate. Jody, I said, I think I better buy you a real engagement ring and finally propose. Everyone burst out laughing at my remark. Jody had tears in her eyes. She always believed that we were married, but I never expected this. Before we left, Mom and Dad made Jody, and I promised to come over for dinner. Jody and I were backpacking until 5:30, and then went to my parents' house for a private dinner. Mom and Dad had a lot of questions. Jody explained how I had come to save her from a bad marriage thanks to her grandmother. She then explained how she got her first job and where she ended up. We were still enjoying their company when Peter and Connie showed up with my divorce certificate. It was nice to know that I was now free. When Jody got a chance to talk, she bragged about our kids and our life together. Mom suggested that we get married before you leave. At that moment, Dad caught the attention of me and Peter. After we grabbed some fresh beer, we followed him. We men went to Dad's office because we couldn't get a word in edgewise. "Today was a crazy day, Dad," Peter said. "When word got out that Tammy had been arrested, people started calling with more information. Half the Dawes staff had to help us. It seems that what we knew was just the tip of the iceberg as to what these two were doing. It looks like the mayor was too. I will go with them." "What will happen to Villa's common-law husband?" I asked out of curiosity. "And how deeply was he involved in all this?" "He will likely be disbarred, but will be busy raising their children. We haven't found any evidence linking him to witches yet," Peter said. "Did anyone tell Aunt Josie?" Connie looked into the room. "Dad, Jody wears a size 6.5 ring, in case you were wondering." A few minutes later, Peter and I drove to the mall where he bought a kit for Connie. Knowing Jody's tastes, I bought a 3-ring wedding set. When we returned, we were glad that they didn't know we were gone. I was on the phone with Josie when Corin showed up with her boyfriend. With a house full of people, we all moved into the living room. The men had to fetch some chairs from the kitchen. Dad ordered Jody to sit in his chair. This let my mother know that something was going on, so she watched what was happening. When I walked up and knelt down to ask my common-law spouse to officially become my wife, everyone in the room fell silent. I caught her by surprise. Of course, she said yes. The holiday has begun. My dad proudly said, "I have almost 7 years of drinking to make up for with my son, and getting engaged by you, Jody and Art, is the best way to start." Peter had to drive Jody and me back to Josie. A lot of stress and anxiety was released. On Friday, we secretly picked up the license at the city hall. Jody found out it matched Connie's wedding dress. Jack agreed to be my best man. Karen became Jody's maid of honor. The prosecutor agreed to hold the ceremony. I had to buy a suit at Macy's. The bride wasn't going to let me marry her in jeans. On Sunday afternoon, in my parents' backyard with my family, we said our vows to the joy of everyone. Even the twins' father was present. We told everyone we didn't want gifts, but my ex-father-in-law took an envelope from his vest and handed it to me. "Colin, this is not a wedding gift. This is your inheritance in advance," he said with a smile. "The rest of my property will go to your daughters." I put the envelope in my suit and forgot about it for the whole day. Everyone in attendance videotaped the entire ceremony and texted it to Aunt Josie. Someone asked where we were going for our honeymoon. Jody said this: "After everything we've been through, once we get Grandma settled in her new home, our honeymoon will be a week in Florida and a week in California, enjoying everything Disney has to offer with our kids. Because without family, we wouldn't be where we are now." Before heading home the next day, I gave Jody an envelope. Inside was a bank transfer for $100,000 with a note. It said, "Thank you for helping karma bring justice. It has always been my belief that the twins killed their own mother. I will enjoy watching them receive the punishment they deserve for their actions, as will my granddaughters." Jody put the envelope in her bag without telling anyone. After we hugged my daughters and parents, Jody and I boarded the U-Haul. We returned home without a single thought, finally free from the whole past. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.